And you have also what's called the adaptive immune system. This one is a little bit more specific. It takes a little bit more time for your adaptive immune system to kick in and begin protecting you. So this is also a combination of cells, but it includes a number of compounds that these cells produce, which in and of themselves have some protection benefit. Now, in most cases, your adaptive immune system doesn't begin participating in an immune response until several days or as much as 2 weeks after you've been exposed to something. So your innate immune system is usually the first thing out of the gate to help protect you, and again, it's just looking for things that either are part of you or are not. And the adaptive immune system is now looking for specific threats, but it takes a little bit more time for it to get up and moving. Now, in addition to that, you also have what's called your microbiome. Now, this is a collection of bacteria that live within your gut. In fact, about 70% of all your immune cells are actually located in your gut. The main reason for that is where most of your infections enter the body. About 95% of all infections come in through a mucous membrane. So that would be like your nose, your lungs, your mouth, or anywhere along your digestive tract. And so your immune system is highly concentrated in these areas, again, to provide that first line defense. But you also have all these friendly bacteria located there that help protect you as well. In some ways, I kind of like to compare this to a healthy lawn. If you have a lot of good grass, you don't have a lot of weeds. And in the microbiome is a lot the same way. If you have a lot of healthy bacteria there, you don't have a lot of things that can make you sick. And so transfer factors have some benefits in both of these areas. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. Now the picture up here kind of shows you a little bit of how the adaptive immune system works to some degree, what you can also see in the microbiome. You can see there's a number of steps involved before you get to that response, and so that's why it takes a little bit longer for that to kick in. So now that we've kind of given you a brief little rundown of what the immune system is, let's talk a little bit about transfer factors. The story of transfer factors goes back now almost 100 years. We're 70 some odd years now looking at where transfer factors were first named or first identified. And it goes back to this man. His name is H. Sherwood Lawrence. He was a researcher, a doctor in New York University, and he was looking for ways that he could transfer immune knowledge from one person to another. And his first thought is, let's look at the white blood cells. Now, white blood cells are the immune cells that circulate in your bloodstream. And he theorized that if I can take the white blood cells from somebody who has experienced the disease and give them to someone who has never had it, can I transfer immunity that way? And through a number of experiences, he was able to prove that, sure enough, you can. And then through later stuff, a few years down the road, he decided, well, let's look and see what's inside those white blood cells that's responsible for this transfer of immunity. And through a number of experiences, he was able to identify these small compounds that were able to transfer immune knowledge from one individual to another. And he coined the term transfer factors, because these were factors that could transfer immunity. So what exactly are transfer factors? Well, current understanding says that they are very small proteins, or peptides as we call them. These are small molecules, very small. In terms of immune compounds, they're some of the smallest, but they carry a lot of information, and we'll talk about some of that here in a minute. So just to kind of give you a perspective of what that means, we take an average woman here, weighs about 60 kilograms. If we go down smaller, about 60 times smaller, you get into a melon, weighs about 1 kilogram. Down 1,000 times smaller than that, you go to 1 gram, about the weight of a paperclip. Now, how many of you here have seen or touched snow? That's not too bad. Now, a snowflake, and this is a small snowflake, mind you, weighs about 1 milligram. To kind of put it in a little bit more context, if you take a single grain of rice chop it up into 30 pieces. Each piece weighs about 1 milligram. And so we're talking about a very small thing here. And then we go down one step further to the size of transfer factors. Anybody know what that is? That's 600 quadrillion times smaller. Okay? That'll be on the quiz later. Make sure you write that down. So the whole point of this is to show you the transfer factors are very, very, very small. In comparison to you and me, they are very tiny compounds. Yet they contain some very important information. And this is kind of a rough picture of what transfer factors might kind of say look like, but really more how they function. You have the transfer factor molecule up there, and it has this little piece on the end. That little piece can be a number of different shapes, is the way we kind of represent it. Each of those shapes roughly equates to some unique characteristic of, say, a bacteria or a virus or a mold or a fungi, something like that. You can have multiple unique characteristics for any one of those things. And so you might have multiple transfer factors for any one virus or bacteria or so forth. But the whole point of this is that shape fits nicely into the receptor that's on the surface of the cell. And that's where that information is transmitted. That's where the transfer of transfer factors takes place. So once you get that unique thing that comes in there, the cell then recognizes it and now becomes dedicated looking for that one characteristic. And so it'll spend the rest of its life patrolling your body looking for that one thing. And so that's where you get that immune education. Now that immune cell has been alerted to something. And one point I want to make here is there's a difference between alert and stimulated. If you say your immune cell is stimulated, that just means its activity is increased, but not necessarily in any particular direction. With that alertness, it's looking for something specific. It's not necessarily more active. Should it come in contact with that one characteristic, then its activity increases. And the other key point to make here is the transfer factors are only interacting with your immune cells. They're not interacting with anything else. And so the immune system itself is always what's providing the effect. It's not the transfer factors. Anyway, so let's kind of see this in video form.
The immune system protects your
We're
body.
going to get into the for life version of transfer factor. We'll talk about these again at the end, but that's recognize, respond, and remember. These are the three main functions of your immune system. The first thing it has to do is be able to recognize something as a threat. Now, many of the diseases and other things you deal with today have an ability to actually kind of hide themselves from your immune system. And so it might take a while, and in some cases your immune system completely fails to identify this threat. So obviously, the immune system's ability to recognize these things goes a long way in maintaining your health. And transfer factors, because they provide that education, that specific information, probably have the greatest effect on the recognition side of things. The sooner your immune system can recognize something as a threat, the sooner it can begin the response, and the less time that threat has to build up its numbers within you. And so in the end, you end up with less of a hurdle for your immune system to deal with, and it can usually handle things much, much quicker. The second, obviously, is to respond. Once it's recognized that there's a threat, you want it to be able to respond appropriately. You want it to be able to quickly remove whatever it is from your body. And if you can do those first two things fast enough, you may not ever know that you were even exposed to something. Many of you are probably familiar with chicken pox. Most of us get it as we're children. And you actually get exposed to this about 2 weeks before you show any signs. That's the time when your immune system is doing that recognition side of things. It takes that long for the virus to build up sufficient numbers so that you have symptoms. Your immune system is able to recognize it early enough and respond, which it's able to do later on in life after you've been exposed because it's been educated. That's why you usually don't get chickenpox twice. Not that you're never exposed again, but your immune system is now able to recognize it and respond fast enough that the virus never gets big enough numbers to make you sick. And then lastly is that remember. And that also goes back to the chickenpox example, right? Your immune system remembers having experienced it as a kid, so that recognition is much, much faster. Your body maintains that memory. The immune system remembers these things for many years, sometimes your entire life, to offer you that continued protection. So we talk about transfer factor. For Life gets our transfer factor not from blood, where Dr. Lawrence did back in the day, but we get it from two sources. We get it from cow colostrum and from chicken egg yolks. Now these two sources are used for a couple reasons. One, they're much more economical. We're trying to harvest it from blood. And it comes with a lot less issues with disease and other things. Now we chose the two different sources, as we'll talk about in a minute here, because they offer some different advantages. Now the cows, the colostrum is something that all mammals produce within the first 24 to 48 hours after giving birth. It is high in immune compounds. The main focus or main function of colostrum is to provide immune information to a newborn baby that has no immune knowledge and has no idea what it's going to get exposed to. You've just thrown it into an entirely different environment that is filled with all sorts of things that want to make it sick. And that colostrum is there to give the baby the best chance of survival by borrowing the knowledge that its mother has accumulated over its lifetime. Chickens are a little bit different. You don't have an opportunity to nurse and collect that information from the mother. It has to all be kind of given up front. Well, let's look at that.